Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another lecture on grammar. This time we're going to be covering all sorts of things, including some errors that some of you are still making, as well as some that we have not covered up to this point. Now, at this point, you should already know what commas are used for, but there are a few other uses that they are used for, and these are things that people have been messing up a little bit. For instance, commas are used after or before attribution phrases or for a quotation. For example, in the phrase, he said, I'm not fond of commas, there would be a comma after said because it's technically an introductory phrase. That sounds irrational, she replied. There would be a comma inside the quotation marks because commas and periods, when they appear like this, go inside the quotation mark, not outside. That's another error that people have been making. Because she replied is an attribution phrase and therefore a separate part of the sentence. And the Chicago Tribune reports a fight broke out between two people over whether commas are good or not. That's why you'd use the commas there, because these are in attribution phrases. They do not get used as follows. Do not use commas to join two complete sentences or independent clauses. As in, he said he liked it, and I agree. That is the correct way. The wrong way would be to say, he said he liked it, I agree. Because that comma does not join the two sentences properly. The error above is called comma splice. So anytime you've seen me mark comma splice, that's what I'm marking. It occurs when two complete sentences are joined together without using one of the fanboys. And those are coordinating conjunctions for and nor, but or yet so. And by the way, another thing, don't use a comma every time you see one of those, because if it's in between two incomplete sentences, you don't use it. By the way, the comma splice is not considered an error in British or European English. It's only in American English. I know, we have to be different. Another way not to use them is in front of or after every single quotation mark. And some of you have been doing this, especially when you've been giving article titles. In the article, Learning to Live with Commas, by No Coward, you notice that I paused every time I came to a comma. I shouldn't have paused at all. I should have simply said, in the article Learning to Live with Commas by No Coward, and then put a comma, because that's probably the beginning of a sentence, but you don't need those other commas. You also don't put commas between a subject and its verb, unless there's a non-essential phrase that comes between them. For example, a boy whose name was Timmy said he didn't agree with that. The reason why we have commas there between the subject boy and the verb said is because the phrase whose name was Timmy can be lifted out of the sentence. It's non-essential material. It's extra to the sentence, so it can be surrounded in commas. However, if you were to say, at this point, everyone knows what they should do. Yeah, no. Everyone is the subject of that sentence, knows is the verb. That comma has no business being after that subject. In fact, if you were to put a comma at all in this sentence, it would come after point, because that's an introductory phrase. All right, we haven't covered this before, but people tend to misuse colons quite a bit, and it's because they don't know what they're used for. Colons signal something will follow, a list or long quotation or a formal statement. A colon can only be used after a complete sentence, though. You can't put a colon in the middle of a sentence because it just doesn't work. You use a colon before a list of items, especially after the words the following, like so. Among Dickens' most popular novels are the following: A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, and Christmas Carol. You notice that there is a full sentence before that colon, which is why we're using it. However, do not use a colon when the list follows the main verb of a sentence or a preposition. The main characters in A Tale of Two Cities are. No, you don't need that colon at all. You don't need a comma there. You don't need nothing there. You only need to have a blank space, because the sentence would read, the main characters in A Tale of Two Cities are Sidney Carton, Lucy Manette, and Charles Darnay. And you don't need the colon there, even though it's a list. Lists don't always take colons, all right? You would do something like this. That's the correct Answer, I don't know why I said it early, but I did. You also use colons before a formal statement or a lengthy quotation, especially if you're using a block quotation, and a block quotation is one of those that would be indented on both sides. The editor points out why A Tale of Two Cities is unique among Dickens' novels. It is the one work in the whole series that fully merits the title of a historical novel. You notice two other things in this. One, you may be thinking, you've always told us that when we're doing a possessive with an apostrophe, it comes before the S. Well, if you have a noun that ends in S, then the apostrophe would come after it. Dickens has a name that ends in S, therefore the apostrophe would come after the S. The other thing is you may notice that there are single quotation marks around the word historical, and that's intentional. The reason why we have those is because you've got a quote within a quote. So you need single quotations rather than double quotations, or else the reader's not going to know where the damn quote begins or ends. And what else are colons used for? Emphasizing words or phrases. Madame Defarge and her husband resemble two of Shakespeare's most famous characters, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Again, you have a complete sentence before that colon. And you also use colons between the hour and minutes of a time. It is 2:50 p.m. Between the chapter and verse and a biblical reference, such as Genesis 12, 1 through 3, actually. And after the greeting in a formal business letter, which hardly anybody does anymore, but you should be doing it in emails, supposedly. Colons do not get used as follows, and I think this is going to repeat information I've already given you. Yeah, it will, but it's worth going into again because people do this really commonly. If ever they use a colon, this is how they must use it. Don't use a colon for a list in the middle of a sentence that's not complete. The right way would be the following are good foods. That's complete sentence. Sushi, pizza, and sushi pizza. A wrong way would be this. My favorite foods are bread, sugar, and cornstarch. That sentence is wrong in any number of ways, but yeah, the colon. Semicolons are quite different. They're used to join two complete sentences instead of a comma. Whenever you think you're going to be using a comma to join two complete sentences, you should be using a semicolon instead. Use a semicolon before a conjunctive adverb, such as however, that joins two complete sentences. That should have the word sentence in it. Ellis Island was abandoned for decades. However, some of the buildings have since been restored. You would not have a comma after decades because then you'd have a comma after however, and it would just go horribly wrong. Use a semicolon to separate items in the series when one or more of the items themselves contain commas. Now, what does that mean? That means if I were to tell you the places that I've lived, and I were to say to you, I've lived in Flint, Michigan, in New Orleans, Louisiana, and in Chicago, Illinois, then you'd probably say, wait a minute. You lived in Flint, you lived in Michigan, you lived in New Orleans, you lived in Louisiana, you lived in Chicago, you lived in Illinois. If I had commas there instead of semicolons, that's where that mistake would be made. But as it is, since each discrete unit, each city and state has a comma in it, you cannot separate them with commas. You have to have semicolons in them. Semicolons do not get used as follows. Don't use a semicolon when what you need is a comma because people actually make the opposite mistake quite often. How he told me he was wrong. However, I did not believe him. There should be a period there. And actually, yeah, that doesn't really fit, but that's a correct usage of the semicolon. However, if you were to say something like, he told me again, leading to an argument, that actually takes a comma. It doesn't take a semicolon because leading to an argument is not a complete sentence. What exactly is a run-on? I don't know why that happened. Well, let's do the whole slide together. A run-on sentence is made up of two or more sentences posing as a single sentence due to incorrect punctuation. In other words, one sentence runs on to another. If they have a comma between them, that's a comma splice, not a run-on. So that's an important distinction to make. Sometimes there is no punctuation. Children did not ask for a pandemic. They did, in fact, ask to be in school. There's obviously punctuation there. There should not have been. That's comma splice. Imagine that that comma is not there. You would have a run-on then. In cases like this, fanboys preceded by a comma can fix the problem. Children did not ask for a pandemic, but they did in fact ask to be in school. Let's give you something like this. Sometimes the problem can be fixed by inserting a semicolon, sometimes along with the transitional word between the two sentences. Children did not ask for a pandemic. However, they did in fact ask to be in school. Children did not ask for a pandemic. They did in fact ask to be in school. So remember, if you don't have that semicolon there, and let's wait for the truck to pass by. If you don't have that semicolon there, you've got a run-on. And if you had a comma after pandemic, in each case, you'd have a comma splice. Those are both errors. But to fix that run-on, you would put a semicolon and that would separate them. I don't know why this is doing this. The two sentences can also be separated entirely using capitalization and end punctuation, like period. Children did not ask for a pandemic. They did, in fact, ask to be in school. In fact, most of you, when you do run-ons, that's what you're doing. You're putting a comma there when actually what you need is a period. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Long sentences are not always run-ons, by the way. They are not. Just because a sentence is long doesn't mean it's a run-on. As long as it is properly punctuated, length doesn't matter. Insert inappropriate joke there. This is a complete and properly punctuated sentence. It is long. It is very long. It is not a run-on. He landed on his back on the concrete, coughed a few times, then rolled onto his stomach and began choking, desperately trying to rise to his hands and knees as the stunned boys around him scattered and the plaza collapsed into chaos. Flyers dropping to the ground, mothers pushing baby carriages at a sprint, a man in a wheelchair spinning past, people running with shopping carts and dropping their grocery bags in panic, a mob of pedestrians fleeing in terror through the fluttering flyers that seemed to be everywhere. Now you notice I couldn't do that possibly in one breath. And the way this person has written the sentence, it's not meant to be done in one breath at all. In fact, it's meant to give you a sense of taking a breath after every comma because it's an action sequence. So this is why long sentences are not always run-ons. And what exactly is a sentence fragment? Well, most of us know, but some of us don't. A sentence fragment tries its best to be a sentence, but it just can't make it. It's missing something, as in spending hours every day after school and even on weekends. That's not a complete sentence. This is missing a whole verb. Spending is a phrase wanting to modify something. Spending hours every day after school. The phrase that starts with spending, sorry. I don't know why that slide doesn't say that. But there's no subject-verb relation within the sentence. In fact, there's no subject in the sentence. What is spending? Who is spending? There's no way of telling. In fact, that looks like an introductory phrase. Spending hours every day after school and even on weekends, he finally learned math. That's why some people make this error. They will put a period after weekends and think they've got a complete sentence there. They don't. They have an introductory phrase that needs a comma. Sometimes a fragment is a continuation of the sentence preceding or following it, like in that previous example, come to think of it. Obesity makes people sick, which is increasing the death rate. Well, which cannot start a sentence like this. In fact, which is the beginning, usually, of a dependent clause that takes a comma, like this. Well, no, that's another error. Obesity makes people sick, meaning that heavier people are more likely to have serious illnesses. Some of you start your sentences with an ing, meaning, and it is possible to start a sentence with an ing form of a verb, but only if it's a noun. For example, eating a lot on Thanksgiving is something none of us should do. Their eating is the act of eating, and so it's a noun. Here, meaning is not the act of meaning. It's continuation of the sentence before it. In both these cases, changing the period to a comma would be enough to create an actual sentence. And of course, you'd lowercase the W and then the M. Some of you are having trouble with parallel structure. Sentences that have parallel structure use the same grammatical form for two or more similar phrases. In other words, if you have an infinitive like to go, then your next two phrases should be to seek, to find, rather than seeking or finding. If your first one is seeking, then it should be finding, going. Using parallel structure, and it's sometimes marked as an error in a paper using the that symbol. I don't even know what to call it. I call it the parallel structure symbol, but it makes it easier for your readers to understand your writing. This would be wrong. In the summertime, I love swimming, hiking, and to relax with a good book. No. In the summertime, I love swimming, hiking, or relaxing with a good book. You notice that swimming, hiking, relaxing all are the same type of grammatical form. If we were to do it the other way, we could say, in the summertime, I love to swim, to hike, and to relax. Or you can get rid of the to as long as the stem of the verb is still fine. In the summertime, I love to swim, hike, and relax. But you would not be able to repeat the to if you did it that way. Or, oh, I think I did it. I did. In the summertime, I love to swim, hike, or relax with a good book. You see that the to links to all three of those verb forms, and that's what you're going for. If you were to break that up into three different sentences, would they all sound the same? I love to swim, I love to hike, I love to relax. I love swimming, I love hiking, I love relaxing. Yeah. Be sure to use parallel structure when you compare and contrast ideas. Going to the movies is more fun than to rent videos at home. No, it isn't. Going to the movies is more fun than renting videos at home, or at least it used to be. You see that when you're doing a contrast, more than or less than, then the verbs have to be the same. Pardon me. You have to have going and renting. To go to the movies is more fun than to rent videos at home would be the way you'd fix the first one, and the second one is correct. All right, and finally, there are several words that people are still messing up after all this time. So you may be asking, what's the difference between these words? Excuse me. Accept is a verb that means to receive or to agree to. I accept your terms and conditions. Except is a preposition that means but or excluding. Everyone agreed to accept the judge's decision. Everyone except me stayed late. Now, for non-native speakers, things like this are a problem because accept and accept sound exactly the same, but they function differently, so you have to figure out which one it is in the sentence. Another one is affect and effect. Some of you are still having this problem, even though we went over it at the beginning of the semester. Affect is a verb that means to influence. Effect is a noun meaning the result of an action. It can also act as a verb meaning cause or bring about, but you have to be careful of how you use it. Crossing several time zones may affect your sleep. What are the effects of sleep deprivation? Those two sound slightly different if you're saying them very carefully, affect, effect, but most of us don't. Most of us slur our language and we say, I have to affect something in order to have an effect on it. And you can't tell the difference, which is why English sucks. Timeouts are meant to effect changes in children's behaviors. Now you notice that there, effect is used as a verb. And as we know, affect can be used as a noun, just don't overthink it. All right is always spelled as two words. The word all right, as it's spelled there, it does exist, but it's not acceptable in formal written English. Are you feeling all right after so little sleep? Oops. Well, no, I'm not, because I'm obviously hitting the button too fast. Apart means separate from. A part, as two words, means a portion of something, meaning that if you mix these up, you are literally saying the opposite of what you intend to say. The boys are fighting, so I'm keeping them apart from each other. The club is a part of the overall school curriculum. Now, what will happen is some people say the boys are fighting, so I'm keeping them apart from each other, which grammatically is gibberish. If you were to say the club is a part of the overall school curriculum, then someone who's not thinking clearly might just change the of from and say the club is apart from the overall school curriculum, meaning it's not part of the school curriculum. You see the difference there. Don't confuse these. Use the phrase amount of when you're writing about a quantity that cannot be counted, but use number of to refer to something that can be counted. People mess this up all the time. I drank a huge amount of water and now I feel bloated. I ate a huge number of Skittles because they were so good. You wouldn't say you ate a huge amount of Skittles, even though some people would, because Skittles are individual and can be counted and they're delicious. You wouldn't say I drank a huge number of water. I don't know why it is that some people make the one error but not the other, but there you go. Bad is an adjective that can also be used as a predicate adjective after linking verbs. And badly is an adverb that modifies an action verb. What does that mean? Say Jane feels bad that he hit Jeff in the eye. He feels bad. How does he feel? He feels bad. That's what a predicate adjective is. How does Say Jane feel? He feels bad. So it's something that is describing how Say Jane feels. He was aiming badly as he was trying to hit Daniel in the butt. Bad Say Jane. Yeah, if he was aiming badly, then that becomes an adverb. So you can't say that you feel badly. That would mean that you have some sort of nerve damage and you have no sense of touch. That's what feeling badly means. All right. Beside means by the side of. Besides is an adverb meaning moreover or in addition. Edwin put his backpack beside his desk. He didn't want to get in the way. Besides, he had everything he needed. So those two are not interchangeable. Use between to refer to two people or things being compared, but if you have more than that, use among to refer to a group of three or more people or thing. That should be things. Between the two of them, Sally was the more fanatical one about cilantro. Jay was the only one among the four of them that knew the correct answer. So that's the difference between and among. Farther refers to physical distance. Further refers to a greater degree or extent. The only time you use farther is for physical distance. And the way to remember that is far is in it. And you use far for distance. Which is farther from Earth, Neptune or Pluto? No idea. And I need to read further in the book to find out what happened. You don't refer to the distance in a book, obviously. Oh, I wish that person would get their muffler fixed because they ruin my lectures every single damn time. Farther and further, that's the difference. He is really being up. Yeah, never mind. Fewer refused. Sorry, the muffler threw me off. Fewer refers to nouns that can be counted. And less refers to nouns that can't be counted. Jeff buys fewer books than I do because books can be counted. I should eat less pudding. You can't count pudding. You can count puddings, but you're talking about those individual pudding cups. That's when you would say puddings, and that's when you'd use fewer. So yeah, she needs fewer things in her book bag. She also needs less time than you do. That person needs more time on his auto repair and less time driving around a car that makes a lot of noise. And that's it. So if you have any questions about any of this, you know where to reach me, you know where to find me, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.